I'm Sophie Bennett, 23 years old, and I've just stepped into a life I never imagined could exist for someone like me. It's a rainy Monday morning in Boston. My new apartment smells faintly of fresh paint and coffee, the kind that feels like a promise rather than a memory. The city outside hums with an energy I never felt growing up. 3 years ago, I was trapped somewhere I swore I'd never return. I grew up in Riverside, a town so small that everyone knew exactly how many houses were on every block and who borrowed whose lawnmower last Tuesday. My family lived in a house with paint peeling off the siding and a backyard more mud than grass. My father, Greg Bennett, was a mechanic with hands that could fix any car but never seemed to know how to fix the space between us. My mother, Helen, spent her days glued to daytime talk shows or arguing with neighbors about nothing, a cold cup of coffee in her hand, smoke curling around her like invisible chains. I wasn't bad as a kid, I just didn't fit into their world. I didn't care for football, beer, or the endless gossip that ruled their lives. Instead, I spent hours in the tiny corner of the house that wasn't cluttered with tools or magazines, reading books about history, science, psychology, anything that took me somewhere far from Riverside. I devoured pages like they were air I couldn't breathe. My parents noticed eventually, not with encouragement, but with irritation. "Sophie, stop reading so much," my father once said, wiping grease off his hands. "You're gonna fry your brain," my mother would snort in agreement, shaking her head while flipping the TV channel back to a reality show marathon. I laughed along, a hollow sound that covered the pain like wallpaper over cracks. I learned early, if I wanted something, I'd have to claim it myself. High school was both a refuge and a battlefield. I applied for programs in science and literature, wrote essays at 2 a.m., and applied for scholarships without telling my parents. They wouldn't have understood, and frankly, they wouldn't have cared. I remember one night, I was 17, sitting in the corner of my dimly lit bedroom, laptop glowing, typing the last sentence of my personal statement to MIT. The smell of my mother's cooking drifted through the house, mixed with the occasional screech of my father's tools. I clicked submit and felt something strange. Fear, excitement, hope, all tangled into one. Acceptance letters came over the next few weeks. MIT, a full scholarship to cover tuition, books, and housing. I held the envelope in my hands, unable to breathe. I pictured my parents' faces, the way they might finally be proud. But I knew the truth. I knew them well enough to know I'd get only a grunt, a shrug, maybe a distracted, "that's fine, I guess." The day I told them, I remember standing in the kitchen, hands shaking. "I got into MIT." My mother barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. Don't forget to clean your room." My father's face remained stoic. "MIT? That's far. You sure you can handle it?" Handle it? I'd been handling life far longer, they realized. And then I left. I packed my small suitcase with textbooks, notebooks, and a single framed photo of my cat, leaving behind a house that never celebrated me, a town that never understood me, and parents who seemed to only need me when it suited them. The train ride to Boston was endless, the city unfamiliar, and yet it was the first time I felt free. MIT was everything I had dreamed of and more, but it wasn't easy. I worked 2 jobs, waited tables at a local cafe, and carried a full load of classes. There were nights I cried into my textbooks, exhaustion pressing against my chest like a physical weight. I became an expert at hiding hunger, fatigue, and fear, smiling for professors and classmates as if everything was fine. My roommate, Clara, noticed. She was the first person to ask the simple question, "Are you okay?" And I almost cried from relief. I said yes, of course, but she knew better. I found friends, too. Jake, a music student with a laugh that could lift the heaviest spirits, and Layla, a computer science prodigy who seemed to see the world in algorithms and patterns. Together, we formed a tight circle, helping each other survive, thrive, and sometimes just laugh at how absurd it all felt. We called ourselves the Misfits Club, a title that stuck, proudly worn like armor. By the time my senior year rolled around, I had internships lined up, research papers published, and leadership positions in 2 student organizations. But despite every success, I still carried the echoes of Riverside, the feeling that nothing I achieved could ever reach home. Graduation approached and I imagined the perfect moment, my parents walking in, clapping, finally seeing me as I wanted to be seen. I was wrong. Graduation day arrived bright and unyielding. I walked across the stage, solo, my diploma clutched like a shield. 3 empty seats reserved at the front row for my parents. I smiled for the cameras, nodding politely to cheers that weren't mine. The applause echoed in the auditorium, a sound that should have lifted me, but instead weighed down my shoulders. After the ceremony, I slipped past the crowd, ignoring the pitying glances, and returned to my dorm alone. I cried, not for the absence, but for the hope I had carried for so long. I didn't call them. I didn't respond when they tried to check in. I had learned to protect myself. I focused on my new life, an apartment in Boston, a junior analyst position at a sustainable development nonprofit, friends who had become family, boundaries I would no longer let anyone cross. 1 year later, I'm walking along the Charles River at sunrise. The city is quiet, except for joggers and the hum of early delivery trucks. My coffee steams in my hands, my notebook under my arm. I stop and look at the skyline, a city I earned brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. Sometimes I think about Riverside, about my parents, about the life I left behind. I don't regret it. Walking alone wasn't failure. It was survival. It was freedom. It was the beginning of everything I had fought to create.